Now, I will say I've had the pleasure of speaking at a lot of conferences, but I've never been introduced by fire before. So I'm glad we came here to Webit. You know, true of our rock and roll entrance, I want to throw out something that's also kind of fun and sexy, which are numbers. Although these numbers are somewhat depressing as we talk about diversity. I come from the United States. In the US last year, of all the companies funded by venture funding, 2.2% of them are led by a woman. And I come here to Europe, the numbers in terms of how many are women-led are even smaller. In the UK, it's 1%. And even in Europe, 93% last year of the companies funded by venture capitalists had no women at all on the management team, not even talking about the CEO. So we have a problem. And as technology, which is a great democratizer, this is something that's supposed to make business more accessible to everybody, comes in, and we talk about this gigabit economy and the idea that any of us can do anything. We have to acknowledge that we have a problem, and it's not necessarily getting better if we look at the statistics last year. So we have a great panel, and we want to talk about what we're going to do about it. And so maybe I'm going to throw it out. The first question will be, we have a problem. Maybe each of you could tell us one idea, one big idea that maybe this group hasn't heard of, how we can address going forward this inequality, this lack of diversity, both in gender for sure, but also in race, also in socioeconomics. We would love, you know, we have some of the greatest companies in the world, and we have a former president here. One great idea. Anybody?
Do you want me to start? Or?
Please.
Yeah. So
Sabine.
I think we talked about recruitment before, and recruitment is kind of cliche, and it's easy to say that we need to make sure that we have sufficient women when we recruit. But if you truly want to make a difference, the point of recruitment, I think, is crucial. So one of the things we're trying to do in our company is have, at least for senior leaders, is have a balanced panel of candidates and a balanced panel of interviewers. So that's it. It's all easy. The reality is...
So you're talking about making the pool, making sure you're
making the pool of candidates is truly diverse. And I think what I often see is that for a lot of leaders, it's extremely easy to recruit fast, because you recruit from your group of friends, from the boys club, and all of that. And the longer you wait for recruitment, the longer you need to step up as a leader, because you have to cover the gap. And I've truly learned, when you want to recruit people, you have to have the patience to find the people on the market. And I can tell you, if you work with your HR services and you have that patience, you're getting to your 50-50%. If not, you keep on fishing from the same pool. So I think it makes a big difference.
I fully agree with this. And what we've noticed is you cannot change behaviors like this. You have to change the mindset. And in order to change the mindset, it takes about 3 things. It's like people, you need evangelists, leaders that shows the way. You need practices, so within your organization, public, non-public, anything, you really need to have the right practices, the right systems, so that you're not having any unconscious bias. And again, it's not about men, women. We don't want to increase division. It's more about promoting collaboration, inclusivity, which are going to be extremely important in the new tech world. Last, you need the places, so really the people, the practice, the places, where in those forums, at home, at school, it starts right from all the places. You keep on promoting this modus operandi. So.
And Sarah, when you talk about practices, do you mean formal rules or informal? Is it about culture, or is it about actually having listed rules?
It really depends. I think everybody knows the old adage, culture eats strategy at breakfast, and so therefore the execution is floated. So it's not like you got one recipe. You need to get the right mindset progressively in the various organizations. You can see that some countries are picking up quite quickly. Some, we were talking about it, takes a bit more time, but the wave is coming. 50% of the world is women. We have to be a mirror of the world. And I'm really proud in IBM. It's always been an organization that's been leading at the forefront of inclusivity for more than 100 years. But we see a lot of those models all across. And every country, every organization will have their own practices. It's about sharing those practices and see what works best.
And Rosen, you were Mr. President, yes.
And you need good examples. Now, let me tell you a story very quickly. The President of China invited me to participate at the umbrella of the United Nations, a forum for gender equality, empowering women. 90 presidents, a full hall of people running countries and governments. And I just decided to take away the talking points from the Bulgarian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and give some examples about my country. I didn't know it was going to work, but it looked like that. I stand up and I say, listen, friends, do you know that in Bulgaria, 2/3 of public administration is women? Do you know that 2/3 of the judges are women? Do you know that in the acting government today, out of 4 deputy prime ministers, 2 are women? And the vice president and so, and the chairman of the parliament, and all the presidents from Africa to Asia, bravo Bulgaria, bravo Bulgaria. So in a way I was very proud, just giving very simple examples that could work. My story is a story also of a manager. I was employing a lot of people in the real estate business. Even my education is computer programming. And I'm telling you that one day I realized that a company that grew from 1 to 1,000 people, construction and real estate company, started employing people. And one day I realized all the managers, all top positions, all those who are responsible for amazing results in a man business, which is construction and real estate, were women. And actually we founded in Bulgaria the first ISO certified Bulgarian construction company that made very good economic success, totally run by women. So really what I learned in my private life as a minister, as a president, also as a manager, is that women are much more reliable, much more predictable, a very strong foundation you can build on.
But how do you explain the difference between government, where you have 2/3 women in so many of these leadership positions, and then we're talking about only 2% of the money funded? So where's the disconnect? How can, without mandating it, how can the private sector mirror more of the success you saw in the public sector?
Well, you see, it's again, there was a very interesting debate here about culture. It's cultural. And I'm giving you another example. When I was having this speech at the United Nations Empowering Women conference, my delegation was just women and myself. Getting out, actually, there was a delegation coming in. They smashed my delegation. One of them fell on the floor in the United Nations. And I look at them, it was, guess who? Japanese delegation. I started talking to our friends from Japan saying, listen, why did you do this? They say, well, listen, in Japan, and if you look at the numbers, for example, it's cultural. It's less than 2% of the women are taking leading position, less than 2% of the women are working. So it's time to change perceptions in societies, and I think those who are doing it have a great horizon.
But I think in Bulgaria still, it's the highest number of females participating in university studying tech.
Yeah.
It's the highest number, which is really good. I'm, you know, with Coca-Cola, we're having, you know that, we're having a regional delivery center here, and we'll be having up to 200 people, and it's actually an excellent market, very competent people here. So I think it's really good. I'm personally from Belgium. I'm very proud to say that Belgium is second in the people having the degree, but the uptake in the industry is a lot higher here than in Belgium. So I think there is some good work happening.
The lesson there is you need a country that begins with B for progress. Speaking of B, Berna, one big idea that could push this forward.
So one big idea. So I think, you know, what you just touched on is very important. So we talk about gap in pay, so pay gap in terms of gender pay gap, but we really don't talk about gender investment gap. And it's big, it is huge, you know, 2% in the US, 10% in EU. So however way you look at it, it's way below 50%. in an environment where women actually are women startups are 2 times more successful than men-founded startups. And there's research that tells us that women actually tend to undersell their idea. They are, in terms of the business models that they have built, there's again, research tells us that the assumptions that they use are more conservative. In the pitches, they're questioned more, especially on technical knowledge, So I think, first of all, there's got to be awareness and some conversation that needs to happen on this investment gap. And on top of it, I think it falls on all of us to do something about it. And it falls on the accelerators, it falls on the governments, it falls on the women entrepreneurs themselves, and also the investors. So if the investors are smart enough, they would actually pick women-founded startups over, and it, bring it to a more balanced situation. So yeah, I think, I would call, my big idea is for the investors to become aware of their unconscious bias and to kind of listen to women-led startups pitches a little bit closer.
Well, in terms of what we all can do, I'm sitting here, the 3 of you in the middle represent probably over $1 trillion of market cap in terms of the companies that you work for. So what can big, and we have another multi-trillion out in the audience, what can big corporations do, not just in terms of their own internal policies, which all of you are explaining are better than the average startups, in terms of how they're allocating money, in terms of the VCs, in terms of allocating money, but what can big corporations do in terms of actually taking action that can accelerate that in the startup community or with their vendors? Anybody want to jump in there, Sarah?
Well, we really apply, and we try to be on the good side of tech, artificial intelligence in recruiting, so that the unconscious bias with transparent algorithm, because there is nothing more dubious or mystifying than sometimes artificial intelligence. And what you realize is already in the recruitment process, just going through and applying artificial intelligence and looking at the CVs or even the interview process from a completely unbiased way, when you have to screen through a lot of CVs, that's something that can be absolutely leveraged and share with clients. Again, it's not like a black box. You do it with a client, you iterate. And that is very important for society, because as investment decision, as many decisions will leverage on AI will need to be transparent, but AI can be a force of good, because it's a bit like you want to double check with your calculator the right number. In some aspects, it's like, have I taken the right decision? If I'm recruiting that person or that person, you have 3 or 4 people, but we all are a bit slave of our cartography of mind, and at least having a different engine will be able to balance as well. And we had a lot of aha moment, even in our organization or with our clients, when they realized the bias they were.
That's Watson on the case?
Watson, but it can be any type of artificial intelligence. What's important for us is we've been in this business for many years in terms of AI, and you need to evolve, you need to work closely with the clients in order to have the customer's approach in terms of how you want to embed that technology.
Now, do you guys, either you guys or are you aware of another company that licenses or sells software so that smaller companies can do this? Yes?
Absolutely.
Okay, so there we have one solution. Good. We're solving problems. Anybody, any other thoughts on this?
Yeah. So maybe I can jump in here. At Visa, what we do is we connect the startups with a huge community of banks, especially the fintechs, obviously, because we're in that business. So we have different innovation programs in different places, including in this country. We just set up an innovation program administered by 11 Ventures. And what we now are trying to do is we're trying to make sure the cohorts that we support in those programs are balanced. So the balance in terms of the ownership structure, if you will. So that's one thing that we're trying to do across the world. And additionally, when we have, for example, we have these programs, we also support specific ideas, what we call Visa Everywhere initiative. It used to be just an initiative, and every year it would be done. It's very, we provide mentorship, we provide, financial support and all of that. But this year we did a women's edition of it. So it's only, targeted toward the women. And we had a lot of women-led startups that have applied, including women-led startups from Bulgaria. So the results will be announced in May in Paris, actually. So really, I mean, those kinds of, we have to be deliberate in terms of trying to drive change and try to drive change in the innovation space.
There's no doubt that corporations have the power to implement change. I want to pivot to how government and the private sector can work together. We have, former president of this country, and we have somebody representing the only organization that's in more countries than the United Nations, which is Coca-Cola. So how can we do this? How can we use government as a force for good? Because, sometimes government mandates actually set back. But how can we use the intersection between government and the private sector to help
I think it's broader than government and private sector. I think it's government, private sector, and education, actually. So I think, and the government can play a very crucial role in bridging the two. What I'm seeing is that businesses, when they can articulate truly what is needed and what is relevant to manage a business, it's going to help schooling and it's going to help education in general. And at the same time, we can truly articulate, specifically when we talk about technology, we can really articulate what it is to work in tech and even stimulate women to get more there. But I think we need government actually to bridge the two. And I think there were, even at European level, there are many, many initiatives where people can stand up and role model and make sure that people, when they make the choice even of studying, are well influenced. And not just the students, even the parents. You would be surprised how many parents there still are that are influencing the studies that kids take. So I think there is a role for the golden triangle there.
When we look at the situation today, we have all the reasons to worry. Nobody questions the rise of technologies and the globalization. They happen. Who is leading today? It's the dreamers. It's the entrepreneurs. It's all of you guys sitting here in this room who are dreaming, who have bright ideas, and who fulfill them. And all of you hope that actually politicians will be part of the solution, because we all worry. The rise of machines, artificial intelligence, all those things bring us to a situation where we need and we have to worry. Because today in politics, we don't see much of solutions. It's the opposite. It's just increasing the worries. A lot of politicians today are addressing people's fears, but honestly, they don't solve them. Playing with people's fears is a very easy job. A lot of politicians, nationals, populists are doing that today. Many of them, even world leaders, question the strength of international regulation and institutions that are there to keep it. And I honestly tell you that I worry too. When I see so many strong men running their countries, using their propaganda machines and measuring their ratings, I'm not excited at all. Because strong men do not build up strong institutions. Because strong men always in the human history question the rules and do not build them up. Strong men, by definition, support interests and not principles. And that's not what we do, what we need to do. So my point will be that in the next years, I'm not optimist about politicians taking tough political decisions in order to build up rules and institutions of order, including for the rise of technology in all its aspects. What I see is the opposite. And also, I can tell you that today, political decision is a symbol of inflation. It's, in the past, if you look at the past, when there was no other solution, when there was a crisis, it was very difficult. People question, people fear. Then you have responsible politicians who are coming and taking political decision, and the political decision was the decision. Today, political decision, I think, is no decision at all. So, we are running into difficult times. And here is my point. As we talk about the human aspect of rise of technologies, we need to know that a certain culture, lessons learned from history, and wisdom is needed. So we better pray and hope and work hard so that the next president of the United States, the next president of Russia, or the next president of Turkey or Bulgaria, whoever it is, the next presidents will do not pretend to be so strong men, but be wise men who will understand how important it is in this crucial phase of dramatic rise of technologies and fears of people that are normally linked to that, will come up with an effort and an attempt to regulate. I can tell you a secret, for example, that I had a conversation with Bill Gates 2 months ago. He said to me, Mr. President, we are in a way giving up this hope that someone could regulate the cyberspace, but counting on the European Union. And here is a point that actually, as the President of the United States or China or Russia and many others are playing their own strong games, being a great powers, the European Union has emerging amazing power and role to play as probably the only institution and union of countries today who understands how important is regulation and who is capable of bringing regulation because of the sheer size of its market to be a global standard. Just look at the GDPR. GDPR happened because of the European Union, and that's just one amazing example how the European Union can be a global power, can help the rise of technologies to be peaceful and not lead to chaos and strongman games, but to solving people's fears, bringing hope, horizon to anyone.
We've been talking a lot about gender. What can we do in terms of this conversation? Also talk about class. There is certainly, and race as well. There's studies after studies that show a diverse workforce, from socioeconomic background, race, and gender have better output. So what can we do in terms of this conversation we've had for the last 20 minutes? Anybody have a thought on what we can do to take what we talked about in gender and how it might be different when we're talking about class or race?
I think there's two angles. What we could do is government and education need to have a very strong review of their curriculum. What do they stand for? Sometimes we are pushing education in such a very theoretical narrative, and it's more a system of failure for students across Europe, but across the world as well. Well, those people, if you look at the EQ, if you look at their sport or art or creative, if you look at design, they are surely a force for good as well. So I think we first may need to reprioritize what we consider as good through the educational curriculum. The other thing is, I've observed, and I'm sure it's the same with the other team here, is a lot of private organization in order to kind of cater for this wave of job, and I see hope in Europe because we've got great education, and in the world we've got a vast amount of jobs coming. I see hope because like we've seen when the car arrived, people were freaking out because of the horses. But if you concentrate on creating all the new services around the car, we're going to have a huge amount of services. Machine will be an enabler, but won't be replacing. And in that sense, a lot of private companies, like ourselves, I'm sure, are asking a call for code. In IBM, it's very strong, but we hear it with many organizations, and ladies of the world join in. Minorities, we have, you have other companies that just work women after having, you know, haven't worked for several years, take care of the children, they want to go back to the workforce, they can code, there is much more modular aspect to do it, so it's much more flexible. So that is also a way to say there is not only one way where you diploma at 18 and 22 determine your life. I mean, this is passé, totally passé. And you still hear at top level people saying what kind of diploma they did 20 years ago. I mean, this is very, and if we change and value the people for what they are, and you know, you can reinvent yourself at every age in terms of this continuous learning. And I see companies really pushing those additional upskilling, relearning, reskilling.
Yeah, any other thoughts?
Just a very, I think, important word for me and for all of us talking about governments is platform. And I truly hope that all of us in the next years will be transforming, will be helping governments to understand how important it is for all those who run the countries and the nations to understand that a strong leader, a strong man, is the one who builds up government as a platform for the ideas of citizens, businessmen to flourish. So government as a platforms for ideas, for development, for services, based on understanding that when you're running a country, you're not there for your own short-sighted strongman power games. You're there to serve as a platform to the others, serve to the others, so that then they will empower you. There is a lot of work to be done globally on the stage, but those countries who build up their governments as a platforms, they have an amazing future in front of them. And that's what we're trying also to do here in Bulgaria, reducing the government impact, reducing taxes, not allowing new debts to come in. So in a way to allow money to stay in the private hands and private initiative to flourish by using the government as a platform.
It's government, it's also culture. You could see that actually one of the great, you know, being here in Bulgaria, it's been a real pleasure, but even across all the CE countries is that there's historically actually been more equality, and they're actually, so you can see the policy, it obviously took decades to implement, and it came with many, many, many downsides, but there are ways to create a culture like that. All right, we got about 4 minutes left. I want to do a couple lightning round questions. I'm going to ask 2 or 3 questions. I just want to show a hand who agrees with it, and maybe if we follow up, we do kind of a 30-second answer. But just to get through a couple more points, Germany has been, you know, pushing the idea of quotas and hiring. So, question: raise your hand if you agree that it's a good idea for government to mandate certain percentages in terms of hiring, how private companies should hire. Yes, agree or disagree? Agree. Raise your hands. We have all agreement. So, you guys, and the 3 of you in the middle, who work for private companies, who right now, you know, in most of the world, you can hire whoever you think best. You're all good with the idea that, you know, you have to have, you know, 40% women, whatever the number is. You're good with that. Good?
Good.
Good?
Actually, quotas work.
Quotas work.
It's the only thing I say. Yeah, it works.
Totally.
Absolutely good. Yeah.
They work, but they create backlash too. So weigh that.
What do you mean the backlash? The positive
Backlash that
discrimination?
people resent, you know, that, you know, people who aren't in the quota resent that they use it as an excuse why they didn't get the job.
Yeah, but you need to do your recruitment process and look at the skills and everything.
Of course.
And
of
you
course.
go back to the point. If you have the patience to have a balanced pool, you can make the choice.
Okay.
If you don't have the patience, then you make suboptimal decisions which are not good for anyone, I think. Yeah.
It's just also a catalyst of change. I think it doesn't mean you have to achieve a specific ratio, but usually in corporation at least, people are working as per metrics. And therefore, it's a catalyst. It will change the mindset because they figure it out that, God, we have to do something about it.
Do you guys have specific quotas
Yes,
at your company?
we do have matrix about recruitment. So we have to have gender equality in terms of interviews, in terms of leadership, different levels. Yeah,
Okay.
and and it works.
All right, question number 2. Do you believe that there is hiring discrimination against women of childbearing age? Yes, who agrees with that?
Sorry.
Say it
Women
again.
of childbearing, women in their, let's say, who are in their late 20s or early 30s,
Okay.
do they face, do you see discrimination or have we gotten better? Who still sees discrimination against women in that age bracket, who does not?
Generally speaking, yes.
I don't.
Yes.
Well, less
Not
so.
that I know of. It must
I
exist.
know of, yes.
There,
exactly.
not as much? We gotten better?
It's getting better, definitely
Good.
better.
Good. There's hope. We like hope. We like hope.
There is.
Okay, next question. We've been talking about diversity the last 10 years, it's become much, much more of a topic, and that's a good thing. And yet you see the numbers we talked about at the beginning of our panel, at least in terms of how startups are funded and the new companies coming on and all the unicorns who are succeeding, again, so male-dominated. So who here, raise your hand if you're optimistic about the next 10 years, and leave your hand down if you think you're worried that we're going to talk about it and there's not going to be a lot of change. So who are the optimists here? Maybe. And Sabine, what do you think? What do we have to do
I think we've seen great
so
progress.
that when we come here together,
we've seen
in
great
2029,
progress, to be honest. And we've had programs internally. We've moved from 21% to 38% in senior leader positions, women. I'm not talking about tech specifically, but when I'm looking at the new tech firms in Silicon Valley and what is happening there, the culture and the climate is absolutely not female friendly. And I'm actually a bit worried that even when they have like their affiliates around the world, that they're bringing that culture to these places as well. And I know people working in these companies now, coming from our company, and they are shocked.
But it is very encouraging that we're having these kinds of conversations and there's awareness. So that's why I think
But I'm worried as well.
I love it, and it's perfect, right on time. We end with some optimism.
Yep.
Yes.
And hopefully we're not having this discussion in 10 years. So, but thank you for your time.
Thank you.
very
Thank you.
appreciated.
Thank you.